Welcome back to the Agentic Insider. I'm your host, Philip Swan. In this show, we explore cutting-edge ideas and trends in AI and data, as well as hear from other industry thought leaders in the AI space. This podcast is brought to you by Iridius AI, committed to safe and responsible AI innovation. Let's dig in. Hi, welcome to this week's edition of the Agentic Insider. I'm super excited about this week's episode that I'm co-hosting with my co-founder, Alistair Lowe-Norris, our Chief Responsible AI Officer at Iridius. And our first guest, we've got two people on today's show, not just one. Our first is Senior Manager of Transformation and Enablement of Production and AI Data Products at General Motors. Our second is, he's a senior data scientist at the AI Center within General Motors. Brian Ames, welcome. And Bob Rapp, buddy from so many years ago. We've worked, we started working together back in the Microsoft days. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Philip.
Good to be here.
Awesome. So you all have such long, amazing experiences. The first question I'd love to ask you, Brian, is what future are you solving for?
Well, we're solving the future that cannot be avoided, which is that AI is the center of the universe. And when people are talking about things as radical as the singularity coming, when you see the top people in Silicon Valley talking about the world radically changing, you might think it's an illusion, but we've seen this before with the internet and things that just are radically transformational. And we have to be ready for this. So this is not a time to be sleeping on it. So we take it very seriously. And it's a radically different future.
Awesome. What about you, Bob?
So all of what Brian said, he's my colleague, he's my boss, he's my friend, he's a great data scientist, and we've met in some mentoring relationship with university students when he was at Starbucks building something called Deep Brew. So he's one of my data science heroes. I'm sitting in the truck that is from GM. It's a Denali, the Air Denali Edition 1. It's kind of a baby Hummer. And I think our CEO would say we're solving the problem of how do we make things that are better, safer, more beautiful, more delightful to sell to our customers, to kind of pay the bills. And so the interesting piece of it is Mary is a cool CEO. I got a lot of respect for her. She's very practical in how AI is going to change how we make things, how we sell things, how we keep them safe, how we design them. And so she's brought in some pretty cool people. So John Francis, who leads data science at GM, and just recently Barack, who's come in to be the chief AI officer. And so what Brian and I are working on each day is we're finding customers that are absolutely thrilled with this Gutenberg moment, but we sort of don't know how to build the Gutenberg Bible, right? There's a lot of POCs and there's a lot of kicking the tires, and I did a poem in my last meeting with Brian, with one of my colleagues we wrote him a Viking poem to thank him for his service, which is great, by the way, but there's probably a town in Ohio that's going to go without power because I was writing a Viking poem. So how do we do good stuff in a responsible way, in an ethical way? And, I'm reminded, I worked with Alistair forever. He's a guy who cares a lot about safe and responsible AI. And that's probably the biggest question. How do we augment humanity's goodness and make them gooder and greater with keeping away from the dark side of all the things that AI can do really quickly and really badly?
I want to dig into just one thing. Bob, you and I have had this discussion for a long time now, regarding about buzzwords, right? Agentic this and agentic that. And it's just like, we're also skeptical of it. So what is your aha moment that convinced you that agentic systems are more than just a buzzword?
Brian and I were talking about taking a hike together at Little Side out in North Bend, where you guys live. And I wrote an agent using Replit. Now, by the way, I haven't been a production coder in a long time, and praise Buddha, that's probably a good thing, right? But I wrote a little app that looks at the weather in North Bend, the current conditions on Little Side, the current conditions on Big Side, and says, when would be a good time for us to take a hike? Because I live in Eastern Washington now, so I like the sun and I kind of don't like the rain. What an agent does that is different from a chatbot or a piece of code is it takes my instructions and it goes, acts on my behalf, like a travel agent. I'm gonna go find you the best prices on a fare, but it's working constantly in the background. And then it gave me an answer this morning, which said, next Wednesday at 2:00 looks like a really good time to take a hike up to Little Side. So the difference is I didn't ask a question, say whether at Little Side. I said, tell me when I should go take a hike with Brian. And then it looked at our schedules and did a bunch of other clever things. And so having everybody will have personal agents. And by the way, we sort of already do, but we don't recognize that behavior. But the agentic future is I'm getting better things done. I'm having a better life. I'm working more efficiently. I'm collaborating better with my colleagues, all those things, because there is some augmentation of my skills, maybe helping me do things better, faster, cheaper, more safely, more delightfully, right? And that is mostly buzzword, but it's not entirely buzzword.
Yeah, I have a take on that. And so I just want everybody to know, like, how my brain works is like when Bob has a question like how to take a hike, I have 10 or 15 questions that immediately pop to my mind, but I only have the cognitive space for 2 or 3 of them at a time. Like I'm a serial processor of these things. We all are. And so what the agents do is they basically can assume the role of parallel processing a bunch of these things simultaneously. I had to do something with some Microsoft tooling a couple days ago, and they're like, well, why don't you like do some VBA script? And I was like, oh.
The 90s were great. We should go back there. That's right.
That's right. It was like, it's this time machine level stuff. And I was like, those days were painful. They were frustrating. They were weird, and people could power through them. But it took a lot to do it, a lot of patience. Those days are over. So it's like being able to set up a natural language approach. Here are the 10 questions that exist in my head. I don't need to translate all that stuff to code. It's that radical simplification that can give, like when people talk about 10x, it's not like, oh, they're going to give me it's a cape. It's just they're going to take the serial processing and parallel process in a way that's super easy. Now I can chunk down the 15 to 3, then I can process, but the 3 are answering these other questions. It's unbelievable. And then it manifests itself in all these different ways, how you interact with business problems, how you interact with data. Like, so the world is radically changing, and I can feel it, and it's a relief in many ways. So it's game changing.
I think that's crucial, Brian. And I think this also allows us to step into a conversation around sort of agentic maturity. So, and adoption of these things. So, I mean, maybe we go to Bob. So, Bob, how you think about crawl, walk, run? Think about sort of level 1, 2, 3, sort of tiered progression of agentic capabilities inside a Fortune 100 enterprise. How do you define that? How do you think about it?
Thanks. Thank you. That was a softball question. It's super easy. I think we've all got it sorted, right? Yep. Well, first of all, at the moment, the conversation is mostly about chatbots. And there was a discussion with a bunch of colleagues that was it's raining chatbots. Because a chatbot is nothing new. We've been chatting with a chatbot with our mobile operator for the last decade or more, right?
Sure. Yep.
So agents really are misidentified sometimes as chatbots, right? And then we started to talk about intelligent architectures where I give a chatbot a query, but it does some deep research like you see now with the LLMs, right? So OpenAI and Anthropic. But what really the crawl, walk, run is we go to a chatbot and we refine information to some point. But from a data science point of view, we're going to get 70, 80% accuracy, and we probably can't afford to spend more money on the project to do much better. So we go, how do we go from 70 to 100% maybe? And so the second piece of that agentic is data science only requires 2 things, data and science. Pretty easy, really. But most of the time, projects have code that executes a chatbot, but the underlying data is suspect. That's why the work that John Francis and team in EDI is so important to GM is getting the data right is 80, 90% of the problem. Then the question is, how did we design the architecture to serve our customer? So if we think about, I'm designing a part, I want to improve safety, obstacle detection. One of my heroes, Steven at GM, is saying, let's look at video and drone footage to reduce obstacles in manufacturing automatically to make our people safer, right? We want everybody to show up, come to work, and arrive home safe every day. So as you start thinking about that, to Brian's point, there's 12 or 15 or 1,000 variables that humans can't keep in their head, and used to be a multi-year consulting project that was sort of disappointing because it didn't give us the right information at the right time. It sort of gave us a dashboard or web app or whatever. And now we can say, give everybody on the team the information they need at the time they need it, just in time, and curate it with other agents to make sure that it's correct. Because one problem with generative AI is the feature is the bug. It looks right, but it might be wrong. So that's worth talking about a bit too.
Brian, what's your perspective? Because I saw you laughing along as we go along this.
But he never ceases to crack me up. He's got this great way of thinking about things, and he takes the edge off. But like when he was saying about the data and science, the actual like flow chart of that is data science, and then there's a little line in the middle which is the schmog. I don't know if everybody like is super comfortable with that, but the small miracle occurs here is the thing that we really need to unpack. So like into this comes like, what are all the integrations, and then what's the notion of the control plane, and then how are you actually going to stop hallucinations from sort of getting into the DNA of your organization? So the battlefield is like the MCP sort of battlefield talks about the heart of this. Like, what is this brain going to look like? What level of control is it going to have? And then how much can it responsibly take over? So like when we talk about the cognitive limits of like how we process these things, it's going to take humans a while to figure this out. But it's certainly something that's top of mind for us. And so when we think about, what the architecture is and what the control plane looks like, that's really critical, mission critical before you take too many steps.
Right.
Sure, I think that's fair. Absolutely.
Let me dive one level deeper. We've all been part of knowledge projects for a long time. The only problem with a knowledge project, you say, we have people that are amazing at something. We hired them for what they're amazing at right here. And the problem is most knowledge sort of management transfer projects don't really work because people don't necessarily know why they're an expert, right? They can't necessarily describe it and they don't really know how to share it. And so we have this oak tree. We have these people at GM that are oak trees. They've been in the company forever. They know everything about something. They're extraordinary humans. I like to talk about Mary in paint, who spent 40 years with paint. And she has 5 little words on a sticky note that describe everything you need to know about paint. I don't even know what that means. But the question is, how do we augment Mary's amazingness to take that oak tree and take our acorns and grow them into oak trees? And that is the human oversight, curation, human augmentation, right? So we have a smart assistant, but if you ask me to do something in the factory around paint, I would tell you, I don't know, do you want Van Gogh? I don't know what you're talking about, right? But how do we take those 1,000 or 2,000 sort of extraordinary humans and make their knowledge available to the rest of the company? That's the sequential problem that it requires a lot of investment because humans have to still own the outcome, right? The quality, right? Yep.
So it really gets into like a digital twin of ourselves, is what you're really saying. It is really what you're saying, Bob, right?
That's right.
One of the things that we've spoken about over the years, Bob, you and I, is the signal to noise ratio, right? And how we do that. I mean, what and Brian, you brought up the image, and I do have this image now of you with a cape. Now you're talking about you running around the office with your superhuman cape. But how do these superpowers are what multiply us, right? So what specific superpowers deploy the multiplier that you're looking for in your team? Is it coding? Is it research? Is it ops? I mean, what superpowers do you think you really need to highlight to bring out?
I like the term citizen data scientist and citizen developer. And by the way, at Microsoft, which is where I was kind of born and raised before I went off and went to other tech companies, we often talked about as citizen, and then we said developer, data science, whatever, because that meant they weren't kind of qualified to do it, but they were excited about it. The democratization, so the chat GPT interface, which we've all experienced, takes people who are amazing and gives them a cape. But it also takes people that are terrible and gives them a cape the other way. So this is the thing that we have to really think about is, if you ask me how to do bread baking better, and I got a friend I'm mentoring on some sourdough, we've been looking at Gale's Bakery in London, which is an amazing chain that does really good bread baking. But I'm a good bread baker. I'm not a great one, but I'm a good one. But my wife, who has no interest in baking bread, she used the same tools and she came up with some pretty terrible outcomes. So I think the thing I'm looking for is deep domain expertise about something, and then a systemic mindset and a curiosity to go find how you would make that work. Because for the first time, we've taken development out of the hands of developers, both for good and for ill, right? And every sort of creative thing that you can do with an LLM and a GPT still requires great deal of expertise. And by the way, the co-founder of RAG, the co-inventor of it, we met with him down at Google Next, and he had a very interesting phrase. He said, most RAGs, LLMs, RAGs, GPTs are Frankenstein. What you need is deep domain RAG knowledge, so you really get to the answer because you really understand the question. That's where that, by the way, that is the big risk here, is that quick, delightful outcomes that are wrong are the downside of a tool that has no constraints, right? And so that's why I particularly like, Alistair, how you guys are thinking about responsible AI. And are you know, it's to quote Brian, non-deterministic input means non-deterministic output. So can I use the object I created in my business? Great question. By the way, I think it is one of the biggest questions because it's really, really hard to figure out.
And one of the things, so you brought up hallucination, right? I mean, and you also brought up the answer. It's context, right? You've got to give it context to eliminate hallucination. Otherwise, it's going to make stuff up, right?
Sure. I mean, but the other part to that, as Spencer was here, I'd channel Spencer for a second. Okay. Spencer would clearly say, you know, you wanted to hallucinate sometimes because hallucination is innovation and invention. Okay. And you want it to be able to come up with a new way of things that it's never done before. And ultimately, that is the right sort of hallucination. So now there's nuances in what sort of hallucinations you want and you don't want too.
I just want to take one big step back and say, everybody treats hallucinations like a GPT problem. BS. It's a human problem. Humans hallucinate all the time. We just call it white lies, or we call it making stuff up, or we call it nervousness, and people are stepping forward. So humans hallucinate. The system it's trained on humans. So it's actually doing its job, but we want it to be perfect. So we're in this this liminal space between these two worlds. But I wanted to go back, like, you know, with the CAPE level thing. And so, like, I went to the Graduate School of Business, you know, got my MBA there. But one of the most valuable lessons had nothing to do with finance or anything else. It was like, well, how do you improve as a human being? Then there's two things. Number one is we can give you at the GSB like these superpowers in X, Y, and Z. Those are certainly important, but if you really want to improve, eliminate defects in your life. Like, so find out where you're wasting time. So like my take on this is like, I don't really, like, I'm interested in the superpowers, and the superpowers will come and they're going to be awesome. But when I think about the agents, and right now it's, do we want to get 10% more effective? It's probably not so hard because of the administrative overhead, and it's the repeat questions that we keep answering for ourselves on a one-to-one level that is just, it's burning enormous amounts of time. So if a GPT can help by having a universal single voice on how to get things done on repeat boring questions, you're actually giving people 10% of their time back, which is the superpower. So like, I'm less interested in the CAPE. I'm more interested in people being like, damn, thank you for saving me so much time because I was able to do X, Y, or Z and express their full beauty as a person. So like, that's sort of the mindset I'm taking right now.
I love this, and I want to dive in a little bit around the human in the loop and culture. So, as I understand it, you know, GM heavily stresses upskilling, not headcount reduction. So how is that something that you think about, Brian, from in terms of communicating that reality to frontline teams and giving them, as you were just saying, more time back to be able to do the things that they didn't have the time to do, and now they can really use, you know, to Bob's point, the brain and the knowledge that's in here to really be able to do more and achieve more.
My initial reaction is that's by far the most beautiful part of my job. And I'd like, maybe this is a little bit too personal or not technical enough, but there's something deeply rewarding about saying to a person, you are enough. Like, and honestly, you're beautiful as you are. Now, the problem is you might be trained on something that's from 1970 or 80 or 90, and you just need the boost into this new world. The world's, you know, radically shifted. So, and not everybody is going to be like in the epicenter of Silicon Valley or whatever. And so they're like these shock waves that expand over, but it takes, it's not motion, it's time. So like a company like GM, it experiences it later. And so the great joy of the job for me and for Bob is that we get to say, well, we kind of live out here. We're like, we're ahead in time with some of these tools that can radically help you become the most beautiful version of yourself. And so when that actually happens, I think it's super consistent with the behaviors of General Motors. I think it's a loving thing to do. And I happen to believe that it's true. You just need to, you're sort of in a race to like get people to that point where they're their most beautiful version of themselves with the current stack. So like that's the joy of the job in my view.
Bring them to the future, as it were, and have them with you.
And you guys know, so Brian and I have been involved in mentorship for a long time with mostly computer science and data science kids and, you know, sort of undergrads, grads. This week, I've been with 5 people, and none of them are technical computer science person, project manager, a quality person in the factory, a business development person writing sort of M&A proposals, an admin that supports a team, and a developer who's just a new developer. And each one of them has gotten, with the tools that we already have at GM, so the approved stack, each of them has done something amazing that they did as part of the alpha team. This is a small group of folks that trust each other and play and make mistakes together early, which I'm a big fan of. So we don't make mistakes publicly, we make them privately, right? And each of them has taken what makes them a tremendous human and super valuable to GM, and they've become a little bit gooder. That's kind of my technical term about humans is we're not ever going to be goodest until maybe 20 years after we die, but we could be slightly better every day. If you really believe that humans can improve, which I do, I'm amazed to see Laura led a team of admin folks. She led a session all by herself on automation of Slack using Copilot to write code and write procedures in PowerShell and Power Scripting that she doesn't know how to do. But she asked me, hey, can you look at this? You can, there always has to be kind of a buddy, a partner looking at the quality, making sure it's good, because we're responsible for what we ship. But Laura changed the lives of 50 people at General Motors by a 30-minute community session that was brilliant, by the way, that she did all on her own without any development support. That is extraordinary, right? I mean, she's an extraordinary human, but a year ago, even, she wouldn't have been able to do that. That is transformational. That is a Gutenberg moment. That's wow.
But that kind of gets back to some of the cultural issues that go on at many large enterprises. Like there's so many meetings, you know, people get double, triple, quadruple booked. This is across the board in many, many enterprises, right? So when you think about your personal workflow, right? Let's think about an agent, like in the use case of an agent. If you had an agent to help you do your personal meeting prep, what still needs the human touch, right? Where is the biggest ROI in an agent that would help you, manage your time, as an example?
There's a quote from somebody, like it was in the Reagan administration, if I can like date myself terribly on this, but he said, I'm happy to answer any question where I'm the only person that can answer the question. Every other question should be answered by somebody else. That was a badass answer. Like it's awesome. We don't do that as humans in general, especially at a place like General Motors. And it's not it's a problem to defeat, but it makes total sense. You want to move. You're told all the time, move together, have alignment with people. And that you have to balance that, especially in the technological world, with the too many chefs in the kitchen.
Right.
So like every meeting that I'm in, like, and this is a, quote from Google, like, was like, the leadership is like, we break ties. Like, so if you want to move forward into this world, it's moving so fast that you will be paralyzed if you try to be perfectly aligned. So how do you take risks? How do you understand the framework so you can have judicious shots on goal to get yourself to the future, so you can have, Laura moments. I'll use her name. I won't use her last name, but like what Bob was talking about is that moment where somebody's like, oh my God, I have a superpower. And like that deep feeling of satisfaction, it happens because Bob was in a series of meetings where he was like, let's break ties and let's empower you. So breaking ties and empowerment is what my calendar should look like. Should is the operative word. Like I was, late to this meeting because I was quad booked into this slot, like there's this, it's how do you get to the point where you can have that moment of saying, I'm just going to the meetings where I can have the highest leverage to help us move forward into the world. And when that day comes, it's going to be beautiful and wonderful. And I don't know when that is, but like, that's a super powerful element of where we're heading.
It can be as soon as you want it to be, Brian.
Let's do it later today then. All right.
Exactly.
And I would say, I had a chance to work for Bill and Steve for quite a while at Microsoft. And one thing I noticed about Steve is there was a constant threat. By the way, I'm not suggesting this is a leadership style that we should all use, but he'd bring two groups of people that were disagreeing with each other or more, and he'd say, I've heard the problem. I don't know what magic thing you want me to do. I don't really want to break this tie. You guys all have budget. You're all smart. You're way closer to the problem than me. So you've got 24 hours to figure out what to do. Okay. And then if you don't, I will make a decision. And then everyone kind of got scared and ran back to their building. Right. But kind of to Brian's point is if I had something running in the background, and I call this keeping me on message. So if I had something that was constantly, and by the way, recording every meeting and all that stuff has become normative outside of big enterprises. It is not normal in big enterprises. We don't record every meeting by design, right? But if I had some way to say, give me a summary for every meeting so I'm prepared for the meeting that says, what did we talk about before? What were the next steps? Who is going to do the action item? Because a lot of sequential work is about just coordination. And as we know, the coordination problem is the square of the group of people that are meeting. So I had 20 people in a meeting around AI governance. So I got to do the math in my head about all the interactions. That's hard. So if I just had a bot that was constantly running as an agent, not as a bot, I didn't want to ask anything. I would say, hey, Bob, here's the stuff you said you do this week for everyone. Here's all the things you did. And here's how they rated those things in some sort of non-invasive way so that we could all get better together. A lot of times there's miscommunication because humans are humans and we've had a bad day, or in my case, I've had a sick dog this week who had surgery. So I'm a little distracted. And if you just help me be a little better in each meeting and help me help my team a little bit more, mentorship a bit more, a little bit kinder, maybe let them speak more. I mean, there's a bunch of things that we don't do naturally as humans. We all do something well, but not everything well. That's the agent I want. That gives me the superpower with the cape to be kind and to collaborate and to mentor and to get the best of everyone in the conversation. That's really hard, but it's not hard for an agent because that's literally what an agent does is work on my behalf while I'm doing other things. To Brian's point, I could do 2 or 3 things, but maybe not 12 things. Right. So,
Right. That's awesome. So, as we, I just want to dive into just one other thing before we start tying this off is you guys see multiple demos, right? You see countless demos of things, right? What separates a science project cool kind of a thing to something that's boardroom ready in your mind? And you, when you see a demo, within the first couple of minutes, how do you judge that within the first couple of minutes?
Well, in an enterprise, it's different than a startup. I've been part of startups and part of big enterprises. And as a CIO at GE Healthcare, I would get people to demo all the time. And I would say, well, this is cool. How do I buy one of those? What I think people forget is no matter how cool the demo is, I have this thing called procurement, which by design is kind of like Congress. It's designed to be slow and contemplative, right? At least that's the theory. And so it might take me 12 months to procure the thing I want to procure. So I love when people think about how can I work with existing contracts, work through marketplace, work with the people that we have big bets on Microsoft and big bets on Databricks and other folks. So the other thing is, as much as possible, build things with public data that have private value. So I saw a demo that's coming up. It looks like it's on my calendar for Tuesday, looking at how you take automotive manuals and do some really cool agentic stuff with RAG and other stuff, because that's public. We can talk about it. I don't have to get any permission at General Motors to use any internal data, but that's really smart. So I love when people do really smart demos that aren't just kind of made up agentic demos, but really solve a problem that I have. Because my job is to be better every day, to help my company make money, save money, make my customers happy. And I don't have a lot of time for, a day in the life of an elf or whatever. I see a lot of very strange demos that clearly weren't designed to have anything to do with my world. So what about you, Brian?
So that in terms of like the calendar, the first thing to always go is is a demo, because I can't tell. I think we were mentioning signal to noise ratio. Like the signal to noise ratio is outrageous with those things. Not because people have bad intent. There's a lot of great ideas out there, but there are actually two kinds. Number one is sort of like a declarative, and then they tend to go like this: "Nice to meet you. Fill in the blank name. We're really smart. We've got this cool thing, and it does this. And by the way, you're going to have to trust us on a ton of details." So like that's universally going to be true. Like it's not a falsifiable claim on the source, but it's a PowerPoint generally, or it's a website, or it's something. But like we call that like the magic bullet, silver bullet, like level thinking, and it takes unpacking. So like those meetings tend to not hit the mark, and it's very hard to action those. But the intent is good, but it's just coming from a point of maybe nervousness or ego, and those tend to not land super well. But then there's the other one, which is the empathetic, which is like, listen, it takes a little bit more thought, but there's a real problem in the world, and there's a real solution, and this solution is useful in this way. And I'm going to let me show you really quickly: problem, solution, how we execute it. But then you get into, and then you have to get into the second part of the conversation, which is, listen, we know that it's going to cost money. It's going to have security implications. It's going to have control plane level implications. Here's how you command this system. This is why you don't need to trust us. This is why this is a system that just makes sense. And so that's like the technical click down that really needs to land effectively. And we tend to run out of time because people are like focused on these other things. It's one of the reasons why those are hard to take a lot of, because you don't know what kind of experience you're going to have.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we're coming to the end here. So if you're okay with this, what I want to do is I want to do some rapid fire, one word answers to sort of 4 questions, and I'll go between each of you. So, and as we bring this to a close. So, favorite everyday Gen AI tool, Brian?
I'm OpenAI all the time.
Okay. Bob?
Tie between OpenAI and Replit.
Okay, that's fair. Most overhyped industry term, Brian?
No, it's this is easy. It's just like that statement. It's not you fill in the blank on the term, but like this is easy.
Okay, perfect. Bob?
Agentic.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, KPI that you check first thing every Monday, Brian?
How much money we're making under our systems.
Okay. Bob?
Money, speed, happiness. Customer happiness is my number one metric.
Okay, good stuff. And then the last one, what's a book or a paper or something that you think everyone in AI should be reading this year?
Everybody on my team must read The Hidden Technical Debt in Machine Learning Systems. Like we're like deploying in prod. That's required reading. There are a lot of others, but I'd start with that.
Perfect. Bob?
I think you should go look at Matt Wolf on YouTube. Follow Matt. He's really quite amazing. He's been doing diff forever. And then follow the folks he follows. The key thing right now is the best information on the planet is on YouTube. There's not kind of a book. And the other one is really understand what vibe coding means and give yourself a gift, even if you're not a developer, and start doing vibe coding, because it is the most artistically beautiful thing I've had a chance to do in a long time. It has nothing to do with writing code. There's everything to take what's in your brain and making it into an artifact you can use. It's an exceptional moment. So, yeah.
I put in one more, plug. The document I'm referencing, a little bit historical and foundational. But if I really want to find out what's happening in like a trustworthy source, I think Andrew Ng does a wonderful job.
Yes.
Anderson Horowitz, if you want to hear about, like, have a real serious analysis, world-class analysis on what's happening with the industry. You want to know how to get things done and what the cutting edge Andrew Ng.
Yeah, and we'll put links to all of those in the links to the podcast. This is great. Thank you for that.
Let me just do a commercial for you guys. So we're in a big company. We meet lots of people. We like them. They tell us they do wonderful stuff. I've known you guys back when we were all wearing short pants. We've been working together for 20, 30 years, and I appreciate the work you're doing. I like the way you're doing it. I like that you're focused on shipping responsible generative AI artifacts and agentic architectures. And I love the journey we're on to figure out how we can do useful things with each other. And I, by the way, strongly recommend the team and kind of the way you think about things. I don't have any stake in the company, although I think I did get a free jacket at one point. So
You did.
to be fair, it's a lovely jacket, but keep doing what you're doing. We really like the way you're thinking about this, and particularly the focus on stripping things that can be used turns out to be our biggest problem. And a lot of people don't talk about that. That's why so many POCs fail, is that people don't know if they can actually use the result of the Gen AI. So thanks for the work you're doing, guys.
Thank you for that recognition. Really appreciate that.
I want to come in total support of that, Bob. Way to go. He was such a good guy, and you're like, sort of like my agent for like how to be a nice guy. But like, I really respect the opportunity to be with like a team of peers. Like this is, you don't run into people that are thinking about it and wanting to share it with the broader community every single day. So I just wanted to say thanks for the time and making me part of the community. Appreciate that.
And I can't thank you enough for all of our coffees and teas. I will do a plug for South Fork and North Bend. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Bob, so much for this. And to our audience, thank you so much for listening to this fun episode. And I hope you learned something new. And tune in next week for our next amazing episode. Thank you very much. That's a wrap on this week's episode of the Agentic Insider. Thank you for listening. For show notes and more, please visit agenticinsider.show. To learn more about Iridius, visit iridius.ai. We'll see you next time.